I don't think a lot of people would know your story when it comes to your kids, like especially Will. I think it was January 17, 2016. You had a pretty bad phone call. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like all parents, your life with children are full. It's busy. It's bouncing from one sporting extracurricular activity to another, and I think that's coming up 8 years ago now. Wow. I remember the day. I can nearly close my eyes and see it, like it's happening right now in this moment. Summer's day, Sunday afternoon, and I was in my office. My office was like at the front of the house, and I was tidying my office. It was a January, and I was sort of getting back into life. And one of my sons, so Will, was 14 at the time, or 2 weeks shy of his 14th birthday, so 13 years old, and one of his friends comes running into my office. He's really out of breath, and he starts telling me this random story. He's like, you know, Emma, do you remember this girl? I can't even remember her name, and she went to primary school with us. You know, these boys were like going into their second year of high school, and remember she went overseas with her parent. And I'm like, Harrison, what are you talking about? And he's out of breath, and he's telling me this story, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, well, she just called me from the beach, and there's been a horrible accident, and Will's jumped from a pier. And as he said that, my phone rang, and it was Will's father. And he said, I'm at the beach, Will's has an accident. And I said, yeah, I know. And he said, it's really bad. And in the moment that he said that, it was like something comes over you, and you go into a mode of like, right, I gotta get organized. Like I packed a bag to go. And Nick said he's in the ambulance. We're going to the hospital, the Royal Children's Hospital, and packed a bag. My 2 younger children at the time, my eldest daughter was at a rowing camp, so she wasn't home, and the 2 younger children were at a friend's house. Packed a bag. I rang my parents and said, we've got to go. But as I was getting my bag, our landline called. It was a time where people used landline. And I picked up the landline, and it was a parent from school, and they're like rambling. They're like, Emma, you know, I was at the beach. And he was a marketing manager for one of the snowfields. And he's like, you know, this happened all the time at the snowfields, and, you know, you'll get compensation. And like, he was obviously in shock. Yeah. And I'm like, what the heck is happening? And I remember that drive to the hospital, just trying to stay really like centered and still, as if I knew that I was going into something that I needed every facility for. So, you know, and we get to the hospital, and very quickly you're talking about not, is my son going to be paralysed, but is he going to be paralysed from the chest down, or is he going to be paralysed from the waist down? And you all of a sudden are wishing for him to be paralysed from the waist down, not paralysed from the chest and shoulders down, all in a blink of an eye. Yeah. So that was that day in a nutshell.
And what does that do to the inside of a mother when?
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, they walked us to the MRI. The MRI was like when they're going to tell you what your fate is. Yeah. And I was there, and I was with, you know, my husband at the time, and I was with my parents, and we were walking down the hall to the MRI, and I remember just sort of stopping, grabbing us all and saying, okay, whatever happens right now, we have to stay together. Like, we have to not turn on each other. We have to get through this. And you just switch into a mode that is something that you've never experienced before. You don't know that you've got it in you. And it's like we've all walking around with this little locked part of ourselves, and in that moment it gets unlocked, and you have to tap into resources that you didn't even know you had.
What about when did you find out that Will was going to be a quadriplegic?
So they have surgery that night.
Yeah.
So they can see on the MRI that it's a spinal cord injury.
Yeah.
And they take him into surgery, and after surgery they put him into an induced coma to give the body a chance to rest. And they always talk very non-confirmed, because there's always an element of like, is there spinal shock? What are we actually seeing? They don't want to commit to sort of anything. And you know, you don't know what it's like to have a kid in ICU until you're the parent with a kid in ICU. So you find yourself in ICU and you can't stay there, and you can't, this was the most crazy thing. Your child is in a coma and they're sort of sending you home to sleep.
Yeah.
And it's, whilst he's in a coma, conversations are around, what does this actually mean? And so there's a moment in time where they're like, okay, well, we're waking Will up. You're 14, you know, he's still 13 at that stage. Your 13-year-old son, to tell him you're not going to walk again. And in all the moments that I've gone through, that moment, I just couldn't cope with. And I remember walking into the Royal Children's Hospital. It's like, oh, you know, we have diary appointments. My diary appointment is at 10 o'clock this morning. I'm waking up my child from a induced coma to tell him he will never move or feel anything from the chest and shoulders down. Like it was like an appointment. That's what we're going to. And I was walking into the hospital, and, you know, I'm in the foyer of the hospital, and I just dropped to the ground and start crying, like hysterically crying, not wanting to go into that moment. And a cleaner came and sort of was trying to placate me, and a mother and her son came up and they sat with me, and they were telling me that this young son who was sort of Will's age, was saying to me, I've never been out of hospital. I've been in hospital my whole life, and I've just been told this morning that I'm well enough to go out into the world, and I'm terrified. And he's telling me all of this, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? Like, I'm sitting in this foyer with these people trying to placate me and telling them their story. Meanwhile, I should be up in the room with my son. And it was in that moment, it was like I was outside of myself, thinking, what am I doing? And I just thought, I just have to get there to my son. And it was, I don't have a memory of telling Will. I think I possibly may have stayed out of the room. I think I avoided it altogether. But they obviously know what they're doing. They bring them out of a coma enough so that they hear it, but they don't quite understand it. And it's and Will developed pneumonia from swallowing water at the beach. Yeah. So he all of a sudden went from being told you're not going to move and feel anything to now you're in a fight for your life because you can't cough because of the paralysis, and we're going to start, you know, trying to clear the pneumonia. So it was hectic. It was crazy.
I can't imagine.